Ladies and gentlemen, let's start now with our first speaker, an infinitely qualified counsellor on problem gambling. Please put your hands together for Rowan Cameron.
Good evening. What a crowd, thank you for coming. As most of you would be aware, a deal was struck with the Tasmanian Independent MP, Andrew Wilkie, following last year's election, whereby the Prime Minister agreed to introduce mandatory pre-commitment across the country by 2014. Mandatory pre-commitment would force anybody who wanted to use a gaming machine to register for a smart card. Cardholders would be required to set a limit on their card. Once that limit is reached, the system would theoretically lock them out of playing any gaming machine in the country for a set period of time. To do this, every poker machine and every smart card would have to be linked to a central database. My role here today is to share my perspective on mandatory pre-commitment as a counsellor who has worked in this field assisting problem gamblers for more than 12 years. The gaming research and treatment industry, as I like to call it, is a small community in Australia where everybody knows everyone. And as you'd expect among the academics and the counsellors, there's a wide variety of viewpoints as to what therapeutic approaches to treating problem gambling are most effective, and what legislative approaches work best in preventing destructive gambling. I must say that out of all of the contentious ideas and issues that have divided the gambling treatment and research community over the years, mandatory pre-commitment, it takes the cake. I've never seen an issue so divisive as this one. For the record, this gambling counsellor doesn't believe that mandatory pre-commitment is an effective tool for the prevention of destructive gambling behaviour. Despite that, if I thought that there was some hope that mandatory pre-commitment could work, I would need to balance this with the reality as to whether clubs can incorporate this tool, sustain this tool, and indeed afford its introduction. There are gambling counsellors who do see value in mandatory pre-commitment. Many of these colleagues of mine work for large welfare organisations, some of which have publicly come out in support of the Wilkie-Xenophon proposal, and, as I see it, doing this without adequately investigating the value of this tool. There seems to be a base assumption among these well-known charities that because this measure is intended to help problem gamblers, that therefore it surely must help. This is a major shame because there are gambling counsellors like me who spent years working with problem gamblers and in doing so have built up an understanding of the sorts of beliefs and behaviours that motivate a problem gambler. It's this experience, this understanding that makes it hard for counsellors like me to see any real value in mandatory pre-commitment as a tool to treat or to prevent problem gambling. I'm very concerned that this measure is being pushed through at a time when the views of this country's leading authority on destructive gambling, its causes and its treatment are being all but ignored. Australia's own Professor Alex Blazinski is one of the world's leading authorities on problem gambling. He's consulted the world over for his expertise on this subject and is regularly sought as a keynote speaker at problem gambling conferences right across the globe. In his submission to the recent Joint Select Committee hearings into gambling reform, the professor voiced serious concerns that pre-commitment may actually prolong problem gambling behaviour because it delays people from reaching a crisis point. The professor says several studies have shown that gamblers do not typically seek assistance until they have reached a crisis, and that pre-commitment may in fact delay this occurring, therefore drawing out the length of a gambling problem. Those parliamentarians who seek to introduce mandatory pre-commitment simply don't understand the intense and destructive nature of the relationship that a problem gambler has with gambling, and in fact even the ruthless lengths that they will go to ensure that nothing will stand between them and their gambling activity. Problem gamblers use machines differently to the majority of players. They use the machines as a self-medicator, an anaesthetic to ease the pain in their lives. They may have easily ended up escaping through other options like alcohol, drugs, shopping, computer games, overeating. People who gamble destructively on the pokies are disconnected. They're disconnected from the time that they spend gambling, disconnected from their money and its value. A $50 note simply becomes a ticket to extend the state of numbness for as long as possible. Whereas you and I might get excited about a linked jackpot win or a feature, the problem gambler is absent, feeling no joy. A jackpot just buys them more numb time. And this numbness is like a drug to the problem gambler. Nothing will stand in the way of achieving the state of, as some call it, being in the zone. This desperation to return to the zone and to remain in the zone for as long as possible makes the problem gambler a ruthless person. Whereas mandatory pre-commitment would most likely alter the relationship that you or I might have to playing the machines due to it all becoming too difficult, the problem gambler will ensure nothing stands between them and their fix. Just like a heroin addict, the problem gambler will find ways to get around the system and go to extraordinary lengths to get their fix. Problem gamblers are ruthless, and problem gamblers are resourceful. Just a few points in summary. The gambling environment in Australian clubs is one of the most stringently regulated in the world. Most clubs in New South Wales are members of ClubSafe. That's a program that I operate as a counsellor, and it's regarded as the world's best practice for harm minimisation and the provision of responsible gambling. I'm especially worried that imposing mandatory pre-commitment on the overall pokie playing population could ironically drive players away from the regulated and monitored environment of their club and into the unregulated, unmonitored, and therefore dangerous environment of online gambling. That is a real concern and something that we're going to have to address. In reality, we can never completely eliminate a minority of people behaving destructively with gambling. I don't believe mandatory pre-commitment is an effective barrier between gamblers and their own destructive behaviour. Instead, our focus needs to shift to preventative steps that can be taken, such as primary and high school education programs that encourage people to ultimately make more informed choices if, as adults, they wish to gamble. The most effective treatment path is one that principally involves regular face-to-face counselling in conjunction with secondary tools, including self-exclusion, re-engaging with family and friends, and replacing the destructive gambling behaviour with other pursuits that foster meaning and purpose in their lives and allow them to reconnect with the community from which they've become, through their destructive gambling behaviour, disconnected. Even though this proposal to introduce mandatory pre-commitment is an ill-considered and unworkable idea, some good has actually come of it. It's brought the issue of problem gambling to the forefront of national debate. Thank you.